I mean, when you talk of human rights, I've challenged them multiple times that human rights are not particular to one ethnicity. How can you say that human rights is only a problem within Pakistan? Human rights is also a very big problem in Afghanistan. One needs to be really vocal about it. And these human rights are not that do not mention Taliban or do not mention American or NATO forces. I mean, if you are really a human rights activist, you need to stand up for all.
Exactly.
And for me, the litmus test always is when I question them, what's your opinion on the human rights happening in India or Kashmir?
Yes.
And that's when they say, well, we never said anything against them, and they are never against us. We don't want to say anything. And it just leaves me really confused that what are they trying to prove? What are they trying? Are they really going to achieve something with this shallow human right tag at all? I mean, there are, of course, serious issues, but if you really have sincere politicians, they would really stand up for every human rights that they can.
Regarding India and human rights in Pakistan, I am going to tell you an interesting story. Maybe you have not heard this before.
Okay.
You do remember Afrasiab Khatak was in Kabul during Najib's era. You know that?
Yeah.
Afrasiab Khatak, Asfandiar, all these guys, they were in Kabul. And now, 30 years later, Afrasiab Khatak and all these guys, they praise Najib and glorify him, how he was a great nationalist hero, but they won't tell you that Najib kicked him out of Kabul. He closed their bank accounts. He said, look, we are at war in this country. These people, they are here living in our country. Their banks are being filled with money from India and Soviet Union while we're at poverty and at conflict. What is their benefit to us? So he decided to kick them out. He closed their bank accounts and he told them, go to Peshawar and do whatever you want, do it over there. And he basically cut ties with them because he was interested with Afghanistan's internal politics, and he was concerned about how India and Soviet Union were using this matter as a destabilizing factor. And this is how they returned back to Peshawar. So when Afrasiab Khatak, when he talks about Najib and when he glorifies him and he says he was a great man, and he doesn't even mention the fact that Najib's regime was responsible for many problems in Afghanistan, for many prosecutions, he should also mention that he was kicked out by Najib back to Peshawar. This is a fact.
I did not know that. I mean, but I can tell you that, Pakistan recently opened a corridor with India, where Pakistan allowed the Sikhs that they can come and visit the shrine of the... Exactly, they can do that. And you can see people questioning that on certain lines. So, the nationalists, they would say, well, look what is happening on the Durand line and on Torkham, and look what is happening. And, there is also always this tag used Punjabi.
Yeah.
And I do not like it. The reason is
the Punjabi, let's say, racism, is that a legacy of the wars with Ranjit Singh?
I mean, I'm not sure if you followed me on Twitter. I've written about it. When, during the speeches, I used to follow PTM initially, but now I do not follow them at all.
Me too.
Because the reason is that
that makes three of us. I was very much on it as well.
Because this is really unfortunate that a really grassroots genuine movement has been taken over by opportunist and parachuted extremists that they say, well, they want to have the attention. I just really feel for Manzoor that he's now not in control of the movement at all. And it's not good for Pashtuns. I mean, had he been in the leadership and, he's kind of forced to say things. You can really tell by that. When I say that, there was a time when Manzoor started his movement, and different politicians would come and speak on his podium from his platform, Manzoor knew that if I would side with one political party, I'm going to lose followers. Yes. Nobody's going to, because people are really politicized. They are really polarized, Yes. If you are with the Imran Khan's Tehreek-e-Insaf and if Manzoor speaks against them, he's going to lose followers. Mm-hmm. So he was right, and I think he was also correct, and it was also the right thing to do at the time, not just for him himself, but also for the cause of the human rights that he were trying to raise voice against. And then he would always say that his politics or his movement is not for the parliament. It's non-parliamentary. They did not seek to sit in the parliament and take active part in the parliament. But then there came these two guys and they say, well, we would go, and then there was this controversy. I mean, he said it multiple times that this movement it's not for parliamentary politics, but then these people came and went there. And then he had to invent a way to kind of find an excuse that, well, they are allowed to do so, but they would not be in my central or executive committee or something like that. But they are who are the second and third most important figure in PTM. You don't know anyone apart from these three people.
And it's funny because the same career politicians are also the ones that are going over to Kabul and, the same sloganeering. So,
this is something I wanted to mention. If I'm a politician and I don't have, I cannot have my own impact based on my ideas or my ideals or my vision, of course I need to attract some support from somewhere. Yes. How am I going to gather that support if it's not really for actual reasons? I mean, like when we talk with relations to Afghanistan, these nationalists would always raise what is happening on the Wahka border with India. Yeah. Afrasiab Khatak Seb, as I have great regard and respect for him, he would lead Pakistani delegations as Pakistani, and he would go there and attend seminars and attend talks and would try to do peace building there. So, I mean, he was representing Pakistan with India. And the same people of his party, people of PTM, try to question why we are normalizing relations with India and not with Afghanistan. And I really feel bad because, I mean, if there were genuine politicians, they would not seek this way of trying to assert their own importance. There would be other ways. But, I mean, in Pakistan, they are important because Afghanistan gives them importance.
Yes. And you know what
they would not be important if Afghanistan would not back them in one way or another way.
And I think,
and the same goes for other politicians who go to Kabul to seek support there. Yes. They really want to be photographed with people of important positions, and then they come back controversial, which is actually a win for them. That's how they stay in the politics. Otherwise, what's their relevance?
That's very unfortunate because while these career politicians like Mohsen Dawar, Ali Wazir, and Afrasiab Khatak are using the PTM as a platform for their own political careers, we have in Afghanistan people who are using PTM, Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, for their political agenda. Because what happens, this is a topic we discussed in our first podcast with Imran Feroz as well, is that see, the thing is, you can't say that you respect people from the other side of Durand line and you love them and you consider them as brothers, and then at the same time, when there are drone strikes, when there are all sorts of war on terror aspects, that you forget about them. But when there is a secular nationalist slogan, then suddenly they become your brothers, and you invite them to Kabul. We had a protest march in Kabul in support of Manzoor Pashtun, which I support. I love this guy, Manzoor Pashtun. If I look at him, if I see his videos and talks, I feel like he's such a charismatic person. He has such a great appeal. But at the same time, we have people who are using his movement and his name for entirely different reasons in Afghanistan. They are alienating the Tajiks, the Hazaras, the Uzbeks, and all these different people in Afghanistan. They're alienating them by brandishing the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement as something to exert their Pashtun identity and the power of Pashtuns over the Afghan state, which it serves their benefit. They are benefiting from this. They think, okay, if we do this, we invoke a sentiment of nationalism, and we present ourselves as Pashtuns, and the state is unified with Pashtun identity and culture. So what's the consequence? Now you have many Tajiks, many Hazaras, many people from other ethnic groups in Afghanistan who are now being very skeptical and critical of Pashtun Tahaffuz movement because they say, oh, you know what, this movement, whatever they say and whatever their slogan is, it's against us, so we support Pakistan.
It's interesting as well. There's another phenomenon. So, I mean, the main issue is that this Kabul PTM alliance, if we term it that way, has parallels to the ANP and Najib and that sort of love affair as well. And the root problem, and I think a lot of people on the other side of the Durand in Pakistan who sort of misperceive this, is that when an entity in Kabul is entirely the product of a foreign invasion and cannot assert its authority on the ground, it will logically look for a boogeyman to blame. And conveniently, that boogeyman has been Pakistan. But now the interesting fact is this, and once again, this has parallels to the 80s and the jihad in the 80s. We hear from Kabul a lot of the times from certain politicians that the Pashtuns on the other side of the Durand, they are Afghans ethnically, they are our brothers, we are the same people. And I agree with that. I don't have any problem with it. But when a Pashtun from the other side of the Durand joins the Taliban, right? They
Punjabi.
are an ISI terrorist. They are a Punjabi ISI terrorist. They are Al-Qaeda and they deserve to be droned back into the Stone Ages. Yeah. However, when a Pashtun from the other side of the Durand comes in and is a supporter of Ashraf Ghani and waves pictures of Dr. Najib, that is the true Afghan. So it's, it's almost as if what is ethnically an Afghan or a Pashtun is defined by your political allegiances. And we know, I mean, I would say that across the other side of the Durand, there is much more sympathy for movements like the Taliban than there is for a man like Dr. Najib who's met his creator long ago and is no longer really relevant.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I've read some books that Dr. Ghani has written.
Yeah.
I mean, he had interesting proposals on how to turn failed states into successful ones.
You have read that book.
He gave a TED talk as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and when I think in President Obama's rule, he was the one who had a 10 years plan, and he went to Washington and he said, "This is what we are going to do. We're going to achieve." And he was really vocal. He would term Taliban as a movement. And he was really against the warlords. I think I just read that now he's entertaining even kids of warlords into his government.
Yes,
to talk to the
movement
people,
Yes,
So, I mean, it's a pity that you look up to someone who you think that is an educated Afghan, and he's going to really turn around this country, and then you look at the contradictions that he continues to do only to ensure his own rule and serve his own interests. It's really disappointing. The least I can say.
Guys, can we take a short break, like 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. We're back from the break. We were discussing President Ashraf Ghani. So, Dr. Saab, please proceed.
Was I the one talking? I mean, I would say I've read his PhD thesis, Ashraf Ghani's. So I think it's a very good document. He has compiled some important facts on the economic history of Afghanistan. He spent some 9 years or more of that. And when you look at his work, when you look at him and you say, well, this person is really well read, and he has also documented the solutions he think would really best serve Afghanistan, and something never really tried. And you look up to him, and then you see him move from academia into politics, and he then rise from one position to another position of importance, and then there he is as president of Afghanistan. And then you look at him contradicting himself, and then you look at him doing everything that he has written in his own books, and he's going against it. I mean, how would you feel about it? I mean, one really gets disappointed in him. And it's not just him. I mean, you look at the sufferings and the troubles Afghans have gone through, like these 4 or 5 decades. And you see, well, when is going to be the day when Afghanistan would become a peaceful country? I mean, you guys, Kakar mentioned that he was born in England, but I've spent my life but I've spent my life in Khyber.
Yes.
I can tell you that I had friends who did not have limbs. I had friends who were orphans. I had friends who were really from very good families, but they would skip meals because they could not afford. They did not have any support at all. I mean, you really look at their sufferings and you cannot go to bed without thinking of them, that, well, what can be done to ensure that these people return to their lives, to their land? And what's being done in Afghanistan on the political landscape, and you look at it, well, nothing is going for them. It's something that some elite, a close circle of elites who are actually doing ping pong and self-serving. That's nothing else is happening. I mean, if I would ask you that what you think, what's your hope? Is there do you think a time when Afghanistan would become a peaceful nation without a military victory of the current factions that are fighting against each other? Would that happen? Would that ever happen? I mean, I would really be the first one to celebrate if that would happen, but I do not see it happening. And it's not just, I mean, fine, foreign nations have installed their stooges, they are supporting or controlling people there. They are dictating terms there. But within Afghanistan itself, there are people who are who've put a price on themselves. They have a price tag. They really are there to be sold to someone, to a guy who can just put a good price on it.
That's
disappointing.
That's a very good point.
That is their livelihood for a lot of people. That's the livelihood.
Exactly.
And it's really unfortunate and disappointing. I mean, it's the point when you see, well, Afghanistan with such rich, great history have half of its population forced into immigration into other places. They are only, their children will only be of Afghan origin. Nothing else will be Afghan with them.
Yeah, and not only it's that in my readings of the Soviet war, right, and the Soviet occupation and the jihad against it, it's whilst the British, for example, invaded Afghanistan twice, these were relatively small armies. Like in the Second Anglo-Afghan War, 40,000 British Indian troops were sent. The Soviet war really and truly, and the communist policy prior to the invasion, really and truly broke the backbone of the rural society, rural political economy. So even without the American invasion and the war that's been happening, we would still find it very difficult as a country to recover from the horror of the 80s. So to go from that to a civil war to Taliban and then this is, it's a nightmare situation that'll take decades to recover from. I mean, like you said, 2 million Afghans died in the war, in the jihad against the Russians in the 80s. Afghanistan's population around this time was about 16, 17 million. So that's a very large, about 12.5% of the population just dead. It's very shocking if you think about the total scale of it.
You would not find a single Afghan family who had not suffered.
Exactly.
There would be at least one person dead, many displaced, some had their limbs chopped off, or some
taken by secret police in the middle of the night.
Yeah. So and one would expect that there should be a process of healing, of reconciliation, bringing these factions together. But what we just mentioned, the legacy that Afghans have to live with. I mentioned it to certain people that you need to reconcile with the 80s. You need to just get over it. And they would say, no, we would never forgive people who committed atrocities against the Kabul regime. Well, then how do you go forward with it?
Yeah.
We have not yet recovered from what Amir Abdurrahman did to Hazaras.
Yeah.
His legacy is still something that haunts Afghan politics today. What happened between Amanullah Khan and Kalakani, it's still something that people fight about.
Exactly.
So, we have not perished. Yeah,
if I may, to play the role of the devil's advocate, because obviously Sangar and I speak to a lot of Afghans, and the whole point of getting over it and reconciliation and healing, a lot of the times Afghans. So, for example, my father fought in Hizb Islami in the Soviet jihad. A lot of the times, for example, my father, if one were to say to him, reconciliation, let's sort of move past, the answer would be the same people that did what they did in the 80s are very strongly represented in the current government. So you cannot move forward as a country without removing, let's say, certain people who have made a career of, like we said, being for hire or for inflicting atrocities on their people. What would you say to that?
That's a never-ending game then.
Yes.
The same kind of thought process would go on their part. There are foreign agents who really support factions based on ethnicities. Also, people supporting Northern Alliance, and then there are Taliban. These, and if you would not take the stand or say that, well, fine, I've been a victim, and you are also being a victim. I was also the aggressor in one way, but you've also been an aggressor in another way.
Yes.
When you go to war, then it's not a good reason for anyone, but then it's a war, and war is brutal. It's hard on everyone.
Yes.
And you have to forgive and you have to forget.
Exactly.
You have to do it.
There
are examples in politics where reconciliation worked for some countries, but
we make peace with our enemies, is the saying.
Yes.
Yeah. So
and that's exactly that's a very good point, because see, when we talk about the current situation in Afghanistan, the war that has been going on for decades, a lot of people always put the blame on either one particular ethnic group, a political party, or it's the outsiders. It's always the Pakistanis, the Americans, the Indians, the Iranians. But I think that as people, we should also be aware of the fact that we are doing the fighting. We are the ones killing each other. And one of the major issues I have with the political debate about Afghanistan is the whole oppressor-oppressed dynamic. Everything is divided in the oppressor and the oppressed. So one category of people should be always considered as oppressor and the other as victim. And what also is very dominant in the narrative is everyone constantly brings up how they are victims. Nobody will say we are all responsible. And what bothers me,
the suffering is shared.
Yes, and the thing is, see, in Afghanistan, there was a Pew Research in 2013, and they asked people about their religiosity. around the world, the highest number of people who said that they want Sharia was Afghanistan. The highest, even higher than Saudi Arabia. Okay, so Afghans, they believe that they're very religious and very pious people. But then, if you tell them, okay, you talk about your problems, you claim to be very pious. So, like there is an ayat of Quran. My tajweed is not very good, but it's Inna Allah la yughayru ma biqawmi hatta yughayru ma bi anfusihum. Allah will not change the condition of people until they change their own condition.
Themselves. Yeah,
so
exactly.
In Afghanistan, if you go to people who support Jamiat Islami, Wahdat, Taliban, the current government has its own list of mullahs like Sayaf and whatnot, and all of them, they're very religious and very pious, but in their politics, if you address this issue, like when are you going to take responsibility for your situation?
You're right.
When are you going?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I in my understanding, and it can be wrong, when there is suffering in the society, people need to have a place, an entity where they seek peace, For many people, it's the religion.
Yes.
So you mete out, you force a nation into war for decades.
Yeah.
If they do not have this possibility to pray to God.
Yes.
How they are going to live. If this would not be the case, what would they do?
True.
Many people, we hear stories every day that people lose family members.
True.
And then they cry to God, they cry to Allah. Their cries are not heard by any rulers or anyone else, That's where they go and they try to find peace. So the more Afghans are forced into wars, or any people forced into war, they need to find an entity where they would find peace, and that is religion for Afghans. And this would continue to happen.
Yes, and what's interesting is when we talk about Afghanistan-Pakistan relations is that obviously Pakistan is a country with 75, 80 years of history, but in Pakistan there is a very strong national identity based on religion. You have the Dars-e-Pakistan. The children are. I've never been to Pakistan, so everything I say I've just read. So so you have Dars-e-Pakistan.
It would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, okay. So you have Dars-e-Pakistan, and you have building of a nation, a common identity. It's based in education. It's in school curriculum. Pakistan television, books, in everything there is an element of we are Muslims and we are Pakistanis and we have a history. So obviously there is a lot that could be said about how this is not entirely accurate or whatnot, but what I'm trying to say is that whatever you think about how religion is used in Pakistan, it did create a common idea of being one, despite different languages, despite different ethnicities. So while Pakistan has many problems, probably just as much as Afghanistan, Pakistanis, there are quite a lot of people who are very proud of their identity as Pakistanis, and as they identify as Pakistanis. Here in Europe, obviously you've seen many Pakistanis who are actually born here. Their parents are from Pakistan, but they're very proud of their identity and they associate with the Pakistani nation. They have Pakistani flags in their cars and everything, which is, it's quite fascinating for a country that only exists for 70 years, on the other hand, when you talk to Afghans, as an Afghan, I'm always amused by how Afghans approach this topic. Like, for instance, I'm very white. So I was at an Afghan masjid in Antwerp, in Belgium. And back then my beard was very long. So I was at the masjid, I was praying, and after prayer they start talking. So I spoke in Pashto, and these people were shocked, and they said, "You know Pashto?" I said, "Yes, of course, I'm an Afghan." They said, "Oh, we thought you were a Chechen." then when they said that, I said, "No, but I'm Afghan, you know." And after a few minutes, one of these guys said, "You know, we Afghans, we have a great history. We've been Muslim for 5,000 years, you know."